Mi bandito, gangsterito, mi costeto, pistoleto. Oh yes, mi strillanto, ubivanto, ugradando, toieto. Oh yes, banco tresto, presidento, o grablando un momento. Oh yes, isaento, regisento, nasnimanto, fino lento.
We haven't gotten to the more perfect union, and we fought a civil war over part of it. And people have been protesting, for hundreds of years that, things were not as they should be, given our ideals and how we should be moving toward them. So I think that's what makes us so special as a country. And the idea that you could turn the clock back and try to recreate a world that never was, dominated by, let's say it, white men of a certain persuasion, a certain religion, a certain point of view, a certain ideology, it's just doing such damage to what we should be aiming for. And we were on the path toward that. I mean, imperfectly, lots of, bumps along the way, but I agree with you, we were on the right trajectory.
Let me.
Document that got passed by the United Nations this weekend called the Pact of the Future document. It's two parts, one on science and technology and one about the youth and future generations. It is quite egregious, and it was done by a procedure called the silence procedure, which makes it a pact, and if no one objected, it is automatically adopted and put into the record as being completely adopted. This is the World Health Organization's runaround, or end around. Since they were not able to get the World Health Organization treaty passed, they decided to take it to the General Assembly, and it is even more egregious than what the World Health Organization was wanting to get passed. Let me just read you something really quickly about what is inside of this pact that is now being accepted by 193 nations around the world and equally open-armed accepted by our current administration. Everyone, it says that this is the power structure, fully digital and maximized for the control of the masses. Everyone will be expected to have a biometric digital ID that marks them not just as citizens of an individual country, but as a global citizen. So anytime you hear global citizen or anytime you hear sustainability, think that this is an egregious thing that's happening at the level of the World Health Organization and the United Nations. Anyone that has a dissonant opinion will be labeled as misinformation, disinformation, or malinformation and memory hold. Perpetrators for unapproved information will be fact-checked and punished by the system, which will be operated and enforced by artificial intelligence. Punishments will include being locked out of one's bank account, accepted by 193 nations around the world.
Distinguished guests, there is a Japanese proverb that tells a lot about the country and about its prime minister. It says, Onko Chishin, and it means explore the past to learn new things. You, dear Prime Minister, showed me the meaning of this proverb during the G7 summit in Japan last year. You brought us to your hometown of Hiroshima, the place where you have your roots and which has deeply shaped your life and leadership. Many of your relatives lost their life when the atomic bomb razed Hiroshima to the ground. You have grown up with the stories of the survivors, and you wanted us to listen to the same stories, to face the past and learn something about the future. It was a sobering start to the G7 and one that I will not forget, especially at a time when Russia threatens to use nuclear weapons once again. It is heinous, it is dangerous, and in the shadow of Hiroshima it is unforgivable.
Why are you still sharing intelligence with Israel at this stage?
I've got nothing more to add.
Defence Secretary, why is the UK still sharing intelligence with Israel and sending surveillance flights over Gaza? You've sanctioned their ministers, but you're still sharing intelligence with them. So that was the Defence Secretary, John Healey, walking into the Prime Minister's residence at number 10 Downing Street, where the government have just announced sanctions on 2 far-right Israeli ministers. But Healey is continuing to send Royal Air Force spy flights over Gaza and sharing that intelligence with Israel. Now, it's a British tradition for journalists to stand outside number 10 and call out questions to ministers. But it's a bit of a charade because we know they're never going to be answered here, and the police have warned us not to step beyond this barrier, so we can't go chasing after the ministers if they don't answer. Given how serious the situation is in Gaza and the fact that Healey is the politician in charge of the UK military, I'm going to try a slightly different approach when Healey leaves Downing Street to see if I can get the answers to the questions that I know you want asked. Hello there, Defence Secretary. My name's Phil Miller. I'm a journalist from Declassified UK. Can I ask you a couple of questions about the Royal Air Force surveillance flights that you keep sending over Gaza and the intelligence that you're sharing with Israel, Minister?
Good morning.
Morning. How can you justify continuing to send these planes over Gaza and sharing intelligence with Israel when your own government has just sanctioned 2 far-right ministers? One of them's the National Security Minister, the other has duties in the Defence Ministry. Why are you still sharing intelligence with Israel at this stage of the genocide?
Look, I've made entirely clear to Parliament the nature of those flights, the restricted nature of the intelligence linked to finding and helping free hostages, and I've got nothing more to add.
Isn't it time you did a proper sit-down interview with a journalist about this, though, sir? Because you've not really had any independent scrutiny of these flights.
I think you'd be hard-pressed to come up with another cabinet member who's done more sit-down interviews with the media in the last 2 or 3 weeks than me as Defence Secretary, because we face very difficult times, changing world, increasing threats, and that's why we're...
But no journalist has asked you about the Royal Air Force spy flights over Gaza, have they, Minister? You've sent hundreds of these flights. How can you trust that the intelligence being shared with Israel is not being used to target civilians in Gaza? So that was the Defence Secretary, John Healey, there, refusing to give a proper interview to Declassified. He just walked out of Downing Street and straight into the Ministry of Defence. As soon as we started asking about Israel, he'd very obviously sped up and tried to get away.
Clear off the steps, please. Thank you. To protect the site. Thank you.
We've just been asked by the security there to move away from the steps in front of the Ministry of Defence, but we'll just go down to what I believe is a public byway in front of the MOD. You can see there how sensitive the Minister is to any kind of scrutiny. John Healey was so keen to avoid our questions about his support for Israel's military that he just walked out in front of oncoming traffic in Whitehall. Didn't really expect him to be in such a rush. You would think he could answer questions and not risk his own life to try and avoid them. Clearly there's a lot there that he doesn't want to talk about. He claims to have done these interviews with other media outlets in recent weeks, but we've been watching them and none of those journalists have asked him about these spy flights. It's all been about defence spending and Ukraine. So there's a real absence of accountability in terms of why Healey keeps sharing intelligence with Israel, especially after sanctions have gone on these ministers last night. Itmar Ben-Gvir is Israel's national security minister. Bezalel Smotrich is known as a finance minister, but he also has additional responsibilities in the Ministry of Defence. So these are the kind of people that are potentially in receipt of intelligence from the Royal Air Force. David Lammy says that they're monstrous. and yet John Healey, the Defence Secretary, is keen to keep working with them just so long as journalists don't ask him actual questions about it. Another striking thing was that Healey appeared to show no compassion for the starving people of Gaza. Footage filmed just hours earlier showed Palestinians grieving the loss of 25 people, killed by Israeli troops for the crime of queuing up for food. Others were bombed in their beds. And yet the UK government continues to collaborate with Israel's military. In fact, Healey had sent a spy flight over the Gaza Strip the night before this massacre to gather intelligence for Israel. He told me the pilots are looking for hostages, but after more than 500 flights, there's no evidence they found anyone. The only British nationals among the hostages were either killed during Israeli military operations or freed in the ceasefire. And the Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, has even acknowledged that Netanyahu's war plan won't free hostages.
Nearly all the hostages have been freed through negotiations, not military force.
But Healey appears comfortable to keep dealing with Netanyahu's government. Last year, he even went to Israel and met then Defence Minister Yoav Gallant, who is wanted by the International Criminal Court for war crimes in Gaza. Documents obtained by Declassified showed his meeting was meant to progress our bilateral defence relationship. Right now, he's even letting Israeli troops take part in military training courses inside the UK, Parliament was told last night. And it was John Healey who warned his colleague, the Trade Secretary, Jonathan Reynolds, not to ban exports of fighter jet parts to Israel, even though those planes have killed Palestinian civilians. So it seems that Healey, like his defence chief, Admiral Radakin, could have blood on his hands for continuing to collaborate with Israel's war in Gaza. No one else in the media is doing this kind of journalism about Britain's complicity in the Gaza genocide. In fact, John Healey's security detail was so surprised by it that they came back out to ask us which media outlet we were from. If you want to help us do more journalism like this, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, share the video, and if you're able to make a donation through the Super Thanks or on our website, please do. Thanks for watching.
On the subject of documents that we'd like to see but haven't, COVID and its origins. I'm sure you saw that just before we sat down tonight, the Chinese State Council Information Office, I don't even want to know what that is, but it sounds bad. They have determined that COVID came from us, that it's more likely than not that COVID originated in the United States and not in China. I'm wondering whether you have any dispute with that based on what you've seen over here. The intelligence community has been responsible for trying to figure out, in part, how this thing started.
So I created a kind of a special teams group, the Directors Initiative group, that is focused on investigating a number of the president's top priorities and the things that the American people really deserve and want to know the truth about. The origins of COVID-19 is one of them. So they're actively working on that. A lot of the work that's been done is on covid.gov. Have you had a chance to look?
Oh, Trump changed it.
It's quite
great.
a transformation of the website. For anybody watching, if you haven't seen it, check it out.
It's the annoying website to which YouTube and all social media used to refer people with Fauci talking points, and now it's been completely
reversed. So it's a lot of what's been found is already there. But the thing that we are working with Jay Bhattacharya, the new NIH director, on with, as well as Secretary Kennedy, is looking at the gain-of-function research that, in the case of the Wuhan lab, as well as many of these other biolabs around the world, was actually U.S. funded and leads to this dangerous kind of research that, in many examples, has resulted in either a pandemic or some other major health crisis.
Well, let me ask you specifically, because we already know that EcoHealth Alliance was partnering with this Wuhan lab to do gain-of-function research.
That's right.
We just have never been able to have somebody say, it was that exact experiment that led to this COVID bug. But have we gotten there? What's the new thing that you're digging in on?
We are working on that with Jay Bhattacharya and look forward to being able to share that, hopefully very soon.
Okay.
That specific
link.
Correct, between the gain of function research and what we saw with COVID-19.
I mean, that would be extraordinary because just so the audience knows, if that's true, if it was Peter Daszak's research with the Wuhan so-called bat lady that caused this pandemic, then we did fund it. Then Anthony Fauci helped fund the pandemic.
The thing that he denied over and over and over to Senator Rand Paul's questioning.
That's right, under oath.
Under oath, exactly. So is it any wonder that he sought a preemptive pardon for anything during a certain period of time by President Biden before he left office?
And then strong-armed and smeared people like Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, anybody who came out and said, I don't know if that's natural. This actually smacks of lab.
And the reason why this is so important is not just what happened in the past, it's because this gain-of-function research is happening in biolabs around the world. I got attacked, and I think you saw this, we've probably talked about it on your show before, when I warned against US-funded biolabs in Ukraine when the Russia-Ukraine war kicked off for this very reason. Who knows what kinds of pathogens are in these labs, and if released, could create another COVID-like pandemic. And for that, I was called a Russian asset. You're, trumpeting Putin's talking points, all of this nonsense, simply for speaking the truth and stating facts that, by the way, are still on U.S. Embassy Ukraine's website today about how the U.S. has funded these biolabs in Ukraine. But my point is, in order to prevent another COVID-like pandemic or another major health incident that could affect us in the world, we have to end this gain-of-function research and provide the evidence that shows exactly why and how it's in our best interest, the American people's best interest, to bring about an end to it.
Can I just ask you one other question on that? Why did the intelligence community, why were they so reluctant to just say that? Under Joe Biden, they were split. The FBI eventually said, well, we kind of think it was the lab, and the Department of Energy said lab. But then the other agencies were like, no, we think more natural origin, long past the point when it did not look like natural origin. They tested 80 or 90,000 animals. They never found this version of the virus. So what was going on with the intel community there?
It's a good question, and I don't have a specific answer to it, but I want to point to the contrast of how in some cases, they are very unwilling to come to express a view or a certain opinion on something. And in other cases, even if they don't have decisive or conclusive evidence per se, they're very quickly to come to an assumption. And this gets to the real heart of the challenge here, and the problems that we've seen is the politicization of intelligence to meet a certain objective or to influence a certain policy. And that is what has been the problem. This goes all the way back to why this organization was founded. When you look at the so-called intelligence that really was used to spur the Iraq regime change war, and look at what that has cost our country in lives, in treasure. Look at what it's cost the world. Look at what Iraq is today, now essentially a proxy of Iran. When Iraq, that would not have happened had that regime change war not occurred.
The most critical time to be there is grades 5 through 8 because you want to catch kids when they're starting puberty, because that's the time in which identity formation is central to their lives. However, early intervention is key. So we actually are designing a kindergarten through grade 2 curriculum this summer. And I will tell you, one of the most rewarding experiences, Nikki, we were in a local school system in an elementary school, and we were in grades 3, 4, and 5. And after we were there, 5 students went to the principal's office and came out. So we are really intentionally going into younger and younger grades.
This attack brought us closer to global nuclear war. This was an attack on one part of Russia's strategic fleet. And it's extraordinarily dangerous. It may be viewed as a video game, watching planes destroyed, but we took a step closer to nuclear war today. Zelensky, this group in Ukraine, I wouldn't trust for a moment, not for a moment with our lives. But having said that, either the U.S. Government knew and assisted, which is horrific to think about, or it didn't know, which is also horrific to think about, because then we're just bobbing in the waves as we step closer to Armageddon.
You know, when someone like Jeffrey Sachs says we're inching toward Armageddon, it's not hyperbole. This isn't some fringe opinion. It's a deeply informed warning. What worries me most is how numb we've become to these escalations. We're talking about strikes near Russia's nuclear fleet, yet so many treat it like just another headline. At this point, it's not about left or right. It's about basic survival. We need leadership grounded in restraint, not provocation.
This war needs to stop. What is happening now, attacking part of the nuclear triad, attacking deep in Russia, is a dramatic escalation that brings us closer to Armageddon. And people may say, well, they have the right to defend themselves, but you and I have the right to live, as well as other people listening right now. I find our political leaders absolutely incapable of the most basic common sense and drawing lines right now. And if President Trump didn't know, that is beforehand, I mean, this is a grave failure of American intelligence or intelligence briefings.
That line really lands. It's not just about poor decisions. It's about systemic dysfunction at the highest levels. If our intelligence failed to anticipate or prevent this, the consequences could be catastrophic. We cannot keep reacting to crises we helped escalate.
We need to understand this. MI6's role in everything going on in Ukraine is dreadful and deadly. I can't stand to watch Starmer one moment. Probably the greatest warmonger on the planet, actually. And Zelensky is killing his people wantonly because there's no serious discussion of how to make peace.
That's the tragedy here. Young Ukrainians, Russians, civilians on all sides, paying the price because no one is willing to sit down and make peace. It takes real courage to end a war, and right now, that courage seems to be in short supply.
Practically speaking, what needs to happen practically is that this war needs to stop before we all get blown up. And the way that it has to stop clearly is the President of the United States simply and consistently stating American policy, not changing it from morning till afternoon to evening. And American policy should be that this war needs to stop immediately, permanently, on the basis of Ukraine's neutrality, and that the fighting needs to stop and the intelligence agencies need to stand down and stop their provocations.
You know, Sachs is right to bring up the intelligence services. War today isn't just fought with missiles, it's fought with narratives, with covert ops, with provocations we often never hear about until it's too late. That has to stop.
Now, I assume that the president has command of our intelligence services. I know that he can tell the British. I can't even start about the British, by the way, but he's got to tell the British, stop dreaming of their ancient goddamn empire, honestly. It's enough. Stop all of the provocations to global destruction. Today, by the way, Starmer unveils the new defense mandate saying we're endangered by Russia. Well, yes, Britain has been after Russia since 1840. This is nothing new, and it's reckless, and it needs to stop.
Britain's historical antagonism toward Russia goes back centuries, but that's no excuse to keep poking the bear today. We're playing 19th century games in a 21st century nuclear world. That's not strategy, it's insanity.
And incidentally, and I think it's also quite interesting, he announced that Britain needs a new war doctrine because of all that we're learning in Ukraine. This is part of what's happening in Ukraine. They're playing with their toys. They're playing with their battlefield weapons. They're learning how to use drones. This is all one jolly experience. They're not sitting down to discuss the end of the war, to take seriously the real security concerns of Ukraine and of Russia, and how this war really arose and how it needs really to stop.
How close are we to the use of nuclear weapons?
Well, according to the Doomsday Clock, the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, that is an expert group that reviews that very question round the year, every year since 1947. We are 89 seconds to Armageddon, meaning in this graphic terms of the Doomsday Clock that we are closer to annihilation than ever before in the history of the planet and ever since the start of the atomic age. And that means we are closer to nuclear Armageddon than during the entire Cold War period. And I think that that is a completely accurate assessment.
Closer to nuclear Armageddon than even during the Cold War, that's chilling. And yet most people don't even know what the Doomsday Clock is, let alone take it seriously. That disconnect between reality and public awareness is part of the danger.
Well,
I honestly believe that that the world has become benumbed by the video games, by the seeing war every day. That's just a video, whether it's Gaza being blown up or aircraft that carry nuclear weapons being blown up deep inside of Russia. That's like a video game that you would see anyone playing on a seat next to you in the train or on an airplane or on the subway. People are inured to this right now, and yet we have a war raging, which is obviously a war of the U.S. and Britain and France and Germany against Russia. And that is roughly 6,000 nuclear weapons on each side. And it's a hot war raging until today.
A hot war with 6,000 nuclear weapons on each side, that's not a regional conflict. That's a global crisis in slow motion. And we're acting like it's just another political chessboard. It's maddening.
And I think Donald Trump wants to stop this, but it takes skill and determination to stop this.
Exactly. Peace isn't just a slogan, it's hard work. It takes guts to say no to escalation, to rein in your own side. Let's hope someone in leadership still remembers how to do that.
The only negotiations that count, and they're not really taking place, are between the United States and Russia. And the United States and Russia should settle the issues seriously with a treaty, with a security agreement that NATO will never enlarge, that the United States recognizes the Crimea as part of Russia, because part of this whole plan dating back to 1853 was to grab Crimea. This has been acknowledged again, time and again, what this has been about. So we need an arrangement between the United States and Russia as the two nuclear superpowers, that the United States is done fighting this war, done supplying the armaments, done with the idea of NATO enlargement, not as a game, as a concession, but as our survival need, because the whole idea of the United States moving its military into Ukraine was mind-boggling from the start. As I always like to remind people, it would be like Russia moving its military into Mexico or into Canada, How well would it play in the United States? Not very well. It would lead us to war.
Imagine if Russia moved troops into Mexico or Canada, we'd lose our minds. So why do we think putting NATO on Russia's doorstep wouldn't trigger a crisis? Empathy isn't weakness, it's strategy.
And so if we just understand the root causes of this, we have to understand Ukraine can say whatever it wants until the United States makes clear where the U.S. stands, which is that it is not at the behest of an extremist clique ruling by military rule that the U.S. installed by a coup in 2014. Come on. Do we have some survival instinct in the United States?
That's the haunting question, isn't it? Do we still have the instinct to pull back before the cliff edge? Because history is full of great powers that believe they were invincible until they weren't. We have the power to change course, but we need leadership that values peace more than power, and visionaries willing to tell the hard truths, not just play to the crowd.
China's military has showcased its latest innovation in robotics during military drills with Cambodia. A robot dog equipped with an automatic rifle was on display. The Chinese military explains that these robot dogs can replace human soldiers in urban combat operations, conducting reconnaissance, identifying enemies, and striking targets. An operator demonstrated the robot dog's agility by controlling it remotely. It can hop, lie down, and even lead an infantry unit into a simulated building. The Chinese military also revealed an aerial drone with a mounted automatic rifle, showcasing China's range of intelligent unmanned equipment.